India and Canada are in the middle of a fierce diplomatic and ideological standoff. Quite a storm is brewing with Sikh separatists attacking Hindu institutions in Canada, while Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is making explosive allegations that India was involved in the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Khalistani, in 2023. India has swiftly rejected these allegations as absurd and politically motivated. Both nations have retaliated by expelling top diplomats, marking a historic low in their relationship.
Let me make three comments. One, Canada has developed a pattern of making allegations without providing specifics. Secondly, when we look at Canada, for us, the fact that they're putting our diplomats under surveillance is something which is unacceptable. Third, the incidents which the gentleman there spoke about, and do look at the video. I think they would tell you, in a way, the political space today, which is being given to extremist forces there. So we believe in freedoms. We also believe freedom should not be misused. And have we had a talk about it? Exactly on the lines which I've spoken.
But what led to this? How did relations between two historically close nations sink to rock bottom? To dive into their history, let's go back to 1947. The two nations, bound by democratic values and cultural ties, initially shared a promising partnership. The relationship gained momentum when Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru visited Canada in 1949, and later when Canada assisted India with nuclear technology, including the Cyrus reactor test in 1954. But this goodwill was interrupted almost as soon as it began. Canada's early support for a plebiscite in Kashmir in 1948 triggered India's mistrust. Subsequent issues like India's nuclear test in 1974, which Canada considered a breach of their nuclear agreement, and growing concerns over Khalistani militancy in 1980s drove a wedge between both the countries. The 1985 Air India flight tragedy, where 329 lives were lost in an act of terrorism attributed to Khalistani extremists, deepened Canada's internal security concerns. Tensions continued to simmer, flaring up again in 2020 when Prime Minister Trudeau came out in support of the farmers' protests in India, a move that India viewed as an interference in its internal matters. But if you think these grievances are old, think again. Only recently, in July 2024, Khalistani separatists vandalized the Baps Swaminarayan temple in Edmonton. Shortly before this act, the Canadian parliamentarians observed a minute of silence in honor of Nijjar, indicating a persistent support for Khalistani sentiments in Canadian politics. But why does Canada seem to be leaning this way? To understand, let's rewind to Canada's political landscape during the Cold War. During this period, Canada was deeply aligned with the US on foreign policy, especially in South Asia. So when India signed the Friendship Treaty with the Soviet Union in 1971, Canada's support shifted to other interests, prioritizing its Cold War alliances. This divide further distanced India and Canada, with Canadian administrations under leaders like Pierre Trudeau and Brian Mulroney largely ignoring pro-Khalistan activities within Canadian borders. The Khalistani movement grew unchecked in Canada. In 1982, Canada denied India's extradition request for Talwinder Singh Parmar, who was a known Khalistani separatist. Parmar was later implicated in the Air India bombing, but even then Canada's government was slow to act against the growing extremism. Decades later, despite attempts at reconciliation under Prime Ministers John Crescent, Paul Martin and Stephen Harper, Canada maintained a cautious stance on the Khalistan issue. When Justin Trudeau took office in 2015, things shifted again. His administration quickly identified the Sikh community as a key voter base, with 18 Sikh MPs elected in 2015, out of which 4 were a part of his cabinet. By 2017, the Ontario Provincial Legislative Assembly labelled the 1984 anti-Sikh riots as a genocide in an official resolution, a move largely seen as a political appeal to the Sikh community. Trudeau's 2018 Public Safety Report initially listed Sikh extremism as a potential threat to Canada, but after backlash from Sikh groups, his administration amended the report, removing Sikh extremism from the list. This change was again seen as another attempt to court the Sikh electorate, you see. It's not just Trudeau's Liberals either. The Conservative Party, led by Erin O'Toole, initially condemned Khalistani extremism in 2018 but later dropped the motion after pushback from prominent Sikh organizations. Both major Canadian parties are careful not to alienate the increasingly influential Sikh electorate, which now represents 2.1% of Canada's population. That's roughly 7.7 lakh people. Sikh immigration to Canada has soared since the 1980s, reaching unprecedented levels. This growing demographic has become a significant political force, pushing Canadian leaders to adopt policies and stances favorable to the Sikh interests. But this dynamic, shaped by vote bank politics, has come at a diplomatic cost, as the current crisis illustrates. So when Prime Minister Trudeau publicly accused India of involvement in Nijja's association, the stakes were high. The Conservative Party, initially skeptical of Trudeau's claims, shifted to a more sympathetic stance to a Sikh Khalistani movement. So, would these moves be part of a broader strategy to avoid alienating Sikh voters before the next election? Economically, India is Canada's 10th largest trading partner, with bilateral trade reaching 9.69 billion US dollars in 2022. India is also the largest source of international students in Canada, with over 6 lakh students pursuing higher education. A diplomatic fallout could have severe repercussions for trade, immigration, and counter-terrorism collaboration, which could affect both nations. But beyond trade, the crisis could have social implications too. Canada's response to the Khalistan issue, driven by internal politics, could strain community relations within its own borders. Social and political polarization might grow. Looking ahead, it's hard to say if India and Canada can patch things up. With the Cold War dynamics gone and India's economy now the 5th largest globally, Canada's long-standing approach of overlooking Indian security concerns no longer fits the new world order. Many see this crisis as a tipping point, a historic breakdown that could redefine India and Canada's relations for years to come. This diplomatic standoff not just reflects a clash of ideologies, but of modern-day political pragmatism. Will Canada reassess its stance on the Khalistani extremism, or will India find a new way forward, separate from its oldest ally in the West? Only time will tell. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below. For more such political deep dives, stay tuned to News Hamster. Thanks for watching.